We will first go on to the lecture on Prophet Muhammad, socio-political personality, which will be delivered now by Professor A. Marx. Professor A. Marx is from India. He is a graduate of Madras University in the year 1970. He was a former professor of physics and of physics in Presidency College of Chennai. He is the organizer of People's Union for Human Rights in Tamil Nadu Congress and has written over 50 books. He is a well-known writer and orator. He has written also about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad, the personality I perceived. We call upon Professor A. Marx to please come onto the podium and present his address.
Respected Chairperson Dr. Saiful Islam, Dr. M.A.M. Shukri, I think he has to come, not yet to come, Professor Daya Edrisinge, and my dear brothers and sisters. Good morning to all of you. I thank the organizers of this symposium for having given me this opportunity to be with you and share my views on Prophet Mohammed, the mercy of humanity. The only qualification for me to be in this august gathering is that I have written a popular biography of the Prophet. I don't claim it as a scholarly historical biography, but at the same time, I remained faithful to the requirements of the historical method. My aim was to write a biography that was not only a narrative account, but also an interpretation. Though I was asked and encouraged by a popular Muslim leader and scholar, Dr. M.H. Jawahirullah, to write this biography in their party organ as a serial, my target was non-Muslim Tamil audience. I wrote this about 10 years ago at the time of Rama Janmabhoomi movement at its peak. They were aiming to build a Ram temple in the site where once Babri Masjid stood. We, the secular, democratic and left intellectuals of India, had been disturbed by the prejudice against Islam that we frequently encountered even in the most liberal and tolerant circles. A coalition government led by the right-wing Hindutva Bharatiya Janata Party was ruling at the center, and the whole nation was rudely shaken after the post-Godhra riots in Gujarat. About 2,000 Muslims were horribly massacred in broad daylight, and another 2 lakh Muslims were rendered homeless. In India, though there was a tradition of peaceful coexistence between Hindus and Muslims, the events of the past century related to the nationalist struggle and the partition riots that followed independence were responsible for the development of ideas about Islam, which can be characterized as crude, dismissive, and arrogant. Many of the leading writers and intellectuals, especially journalists in India, believed and described Islam as an inherently intolerant and fanatical faith, which deserved no respect. The shocking events of 9/11, serial bomb blasts in Mumbai and Coimbatore, were used by these people to endorse all the negative right-wing notions of Islam as a fanatical faith that encouraged murder and terror. These critics of Islam frequently quoted out of context the most ferocious passages of the Holy Quran and events in the life of Prophet, arguing that these could easily inspire and endorse extremism. They ignored very easily the fact that not only the Jewish and Christian scriptures, but Bhagavad Gita can be interpreted in the same way. In the Torah, the sacred book of Jews, the people of Israel are repeatedly urged to drive Canaanites from the promised land, to destroy their sacred symbols, and make no treaty with them. There is no place in it for reconciliation. with the other. Today, Jewish fundamentalists use this to justify Israeli violence against Palestinians and the religious opposition to Middle East peace processes. Even Jesus Christ, the pacifist as portrayed in the Gospels, behaved quite aggressively often. At one instant, he even says that he has come to bring not peace but this word. But nobody used these verses when Christian Serbs horribly slaughtered thousands of Muslims in Srebrenica. In the early years of the last century, most of the Hindu nationalist leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Sri Aurobindo, and Bankim Chandra Chatterjee and others invented Bhagavad Gita as a holy text for Hindus, only to interpret it as one that hailed violence against alliance as one's duty. But nobody accused either Hinduism or Christianity or Judaism as inherently dangerous and violent faiths. The horrible events of last 2 decades all over the world made us to accept the fact that we simply could not afford to cultivate a distorted and inaccurate view of a religion followed by 1.2 billion Muslims who make up a fifth of the world, who make up a fifth of the world's population. About 13.4% of Indians are Muslims. The second largest Muslim population live in India. The secular intelligentsia who want to build a safe and stable world where people can live together in harmony, accepting and respecting others' differences, cannot simply sit as a mute witnesses to all these happenings. So we thought that in a time of fascist resurgence, our duty is to contribute something towards the development of adequate understanding of Islam among the general public. We have also to inculcate a suspicion among those with such inadequate understanding about the competency to judge Islam fairly or to discuss these things in a useful way to build a peaceful and harmonious society. With these ideas in our mind, we published a series of pamphlets introducing Islam as a peaceful religion and Prophet Mohamed as a peacemaker par excellence. Though he had to fight against what Muslims called Jahiliyyah, the term used by Muslims to describe the concept corrupt barbarism of pre-Islamic Arabia, Mohammed spent most of his life to stop all kinds of slaughter of the holders of alien faiths. Mohammed was a peacemaker who risked his life and nearly lost the loyalty of his closest companions because he was determined to effect a reconciliation with Mecca as he signed the Hudaybiyah Treaty. Instead of fighting an intransigent war to the death, he was always prepared to negotiate and compromise and was even ready to be humiliated. But all this proved in the verse of Holy Quran to be a great victory fought. We need Prophet Muhammad's biography at this dangerous and frivolous time. We should not allow either the extremists or the detractors to hijack his biography and twist it to suit their own ends. Above all, there is much to learn about how we should conduct ourselves in a period of reconciliation from the life of the Prophet. When he started his career in a war-torn Arabia, he had no clear agenda or blueprint in his hands because Prophet Muhammad he has no blueprint in his hand because any such plan will inevitably rooted in the old violent world of attack, vengeance and retaliation. Muhammad simply listened and obeyed not only the words of God, but also the events unfolded before him with attention, intelligence and sensibility and responded accordingly. Thus he was able to find out a new solution and new method which is most suited at the time of Jahiliyyah, which was utterly inconceivable at the outset. We need new solutions for an unprecedented situation and can learn much from the Prophet's restraint. We learn much from Mohamed, the art of peace. His whole career shows that the first priority must be to extirpate hatred, greed, and contempt from our own hearts so that we can be always open to the other. In one of the most turbulent years of last decade, we plan to celebrate the Miladi-Nabi in a most populous bazaar of Triplicane in Chennai. Actually, it was not a celebration, but a symposium like this, held in a marketplace where there was a mischief let loose by the Hindu right extremists few weeks back during a Vinayaka idol procession. All the speakers who spoke on the life and deeds of Prophet were from other religions except only one. Everybody was astonished to see non-Muslims doing it. Not only we are not Muslims, in a sense we are infidels, non-believing communists who work together in an organization propagating the thoughts of the great atheist and social reformer of South Asia, Periyar E.V. Ramasamy. In fact, initially, even the Muslims looked as suspicious. But as it turned, we are greatly moved by the warm and generous reception Muslims gave our efforts in that difficult time. Professor Jawahirullah ranged me and requested to write a serial on Prophet Mohammed in their magazine, which I accepted after much hesitation. Indeed, Muslims and serious Islamic scholars were first to take my book seriously. They not only read the book, but arranged discussions and passed valuable comments. Of course, I was bitterly criticized by some of our left colleagues and atheist comrades. How can an organization which has faith in Periyar E.V.R., Karl Marx and B.R. Ambedkar can eulogize a mystic intoxicated with divine? I told them that I am trying to understand and to make understandable how and why this mystic intoxicated with the divine was able to become the head of a state, a military commander, and an ideologue who tried to establish a society based on justice and equality in a part of this earth itself and not in a life after the death. All the religions speak about a fair deal and judgment after death. Though Islam also believed in heaven and in the last day, Prophet Mohammed, following the words of Allah, made it mandatory to establish a just and equal society in this life itself, in this earth itself. In this way, his life was very similar to an agitator and revolutionary who fought against any sort of tyranny and unjust society. He was a very simple person who lost both his parents at very early age, had to live a life of underground for about 2 years, avoiding preaching of his message publicly, comes overground at a proper time, declared his message, suffers all sorts of humiliation, including social boycott, seeks asylum in a nearby country with his followers, organizes, fights, and wins not only the state but also the heart of the people, including the enemies who persecuted him once. In this way, he was able to change the course of the history of the world. As the French Marxist Maxime Rodinson says, "For my part, I am convinced that an atheist who is receptive to existential problems can understand a religious outlook, provided he takes enough trouble and sets aside all contempt and all sense of superiority. He can understand it, I think, to the same degree that an art critic understands a painter, an adult a child, a man a woman, or vice versa, a solitary historian an active politician, a vigorously healthy person an invalid." Masterpieces of biography were written in this way. When I was confronted with the questions about the weaknesses and failures of Prophet, I simply replied, if Muhammad was a man and not an angel or God, as many of his disciples and Mohamed and the Holy Quran had insisted very often. How could he have escaped the defects, vices, and passions of mankind? Like many other prophets, Mohammed was both like an ordinary person, never born like an ordinary person, never cared to perform any miracle, and also died like an ordinary human being. I have just recorded these virtues as well as imperfections as reported by the sources. I was very cautious of the facts that though the source on the life of the prophet were abundant and clear, but not always reliable. The oldest texts we possess on the biography of the prophet were written at least 120 years after prophet's death. That is roughly the distance that separates us from 1870s. So I was very cautious in comparing the different sources and choose only the most reliable one. I relied more on Ibn Ishaq, which was the oldest source and hence more near to truth, though it is not much refined as compared to the latter texts. We have a role model in Periyar, E.V. Ramasamy, in our approach to Islam and its prophet. He is a hardcore atheist who propagated throughout his life as God is nowhere. He used to declare that one who believes God is a fool and one who propagates is a scoundrel. He was a bitter critic of Hindu religion for its theoretical acceptance of casteism and untouchability. He was a founder of Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu and was a bitter critic of Brahminism till his death. Both the DMK and ADMK, which ruled Tamil Nadu for the past 40 years, are offsprings of Dravida Kadagam formed by Periyar. Being a bitter critic of casteism and untouchability, he openly declared the Sudras of Tamil Nadu as well as India, to convert to Islam, which according to him is more egalitarian than any other religion of the world. He told that untouchability is the most horrible disease in the world, as worse as cancer and leprosy. These are all his own words. To escape from this disease, the only remedy available to mankind is Islam, he declared. A small booklet published by him in the year 1947 was entitled as Ina Ilivu Ninga Islame Nanmarundu, which can be roughly translated as Islam is the only good medicine to escape from the disease of untouchability. He repeatedly called the Sudra Tamils to come out of the Hindu fold. He speaks, there is only one medicine for this, that is Islam. No other medicine for this. Otherwise, we have to suffer. If you want to get relief and walk straight again, in today's situation, Islam is the only available remedy. It will give you a land to live, bravery to fight, and it will make to walk you like a hero. After the historical Vaikam struggle led by him against untouchability in Kerala, he organized a conference in Ernakulam and passed a resolution asking all the Hindus to convert to Islam, as it has no caste hierarchy in it. About 50 persons converted to Islam on the same day. When Dr. Ambedkar, another social revolutionary of India, declared his intention to convert to Islam in 1930s, almost all the leaders of India condemned his idea. But Periyar supported Ambedkar's decision. He gave a telegram to PRA saying, don't go alone. You should go with at least 1 lakh people with you. When finally Dr. Ambedkar decided to convert to Buddhism, the comment passed by Periyar was like this. When B.R. Ambedkar announced that he would embrace Buddhism, as expected, everybody opposed it. But however, those who follow Hinduism, especially the Brahmins, were not as much scared of Buddhism as that of Islam. Because in India, many aspects of Buddhism has merged with that of the Hinduism. In the first quarter of the last century, Periyar organized a series of conferences all over Tamil Nadu, which are known as Conferences for Annihilation of Religion. This raised doubts among Muslims as well as non-Muslims. When he was asked how he supports conversion to Islam on one hand and organizes conferences to annihilate religions on the other hand, he quietly replied, "My ultimate aim is the annihilation of all religions. But until then, if any one of the religion is to exist, it should be Islam." When asked why, he said, number one, Islam accepts only one God and rejects multitudes of gods. It is against all sorts of obscurantism and it is against idolatry. Number two, true equality and brotherhood is seen only in Islam. Nobody is prevented from either reading from the holy book or entering the places of worship on the basis of caste and untouchability. He further added, Islam should not be identified with the external signs such as wearing a lungi or having a beard. Islam means peace, submission, and piety. In our Hindu society, also many elders have declared that there is only one God, one caste, Onre Kulam Orune Devan, but not followed in practice. It is practiced only in Islam. Here nobody is discriminated on the basis of his or her birth. He continued to say, comrades, I want to bring to your notice once again some facts. Prophet Mohamed has said that people have only one God before them. People should never resort to idol worship. Whatever I have said, you should analyze with your reason before accepting it. Finally, he means the Prophet, said one more thing. I am the last prophet. After me, God won't send any more prophets. Periyar once again says, whatever you may think and feel over the statement of the Prophet, after him till today, in this field of prophecy, nobody has borne to say anything more and beneficial. To that extent, the Prophet has given all the philosophy and principles that is necessary for the humanity. These are the words of Periyar, the atheist. Periyar also criticized Islam for some obscurantist beliefs and rituals that have infiltrated into Islam in practice such as Dargah worship, festivals such as Sandanakudu and sorcery. But he was always careful enough to distinguish Hajj pilgrimage from similar other rituals in other religions such as visiting holy shrines or dipping in holy tanks and rivers. These rituals of other religions are based on the belief that all the sins committed in your life will be washed away by such holy dips in the holy waters. But for Muslims, Hajj is a religious duty. It is going to the place of birth of their Prophet. It is to reassure an inner attitude that is necessary for the brotherhood in Islam. When one asked, then, why didn't you convert to Islam? Of course, everybody asked Periyar, you are asking everybody to come out of Hindu fold and convert to Islam. Then why don't you convert to Islam? He replied, when one asked, then why didn't you convert to Islam? His answer was very simple. I have to criticize Hindu religion. This will become impossible once I come out of it. Not only Periyar, Marxists all over the world were also attracted towards Islam. All those who love equality and brotherhood are always fascinated with Islam. Marxist scholars like Maxim Rodinson and Eamon Rai had written many authentic books on Prophet and Islam. Scholars like Manero had gone to the extent of branding Islam as the modern incarnation of communism. Branding communism as the modern incarnation of Islam. This is because from its inception, Islam targeted the weak and the poor. Al-Zuri, a Meccan born some 40 years after the death of the Prophet and one who had devoted his whole life in the research into the early days of Islam makes it clear that the early converts come from two particular groups, the young and the weak. The most disadvantaged people of the Meccan society are the natural first converts to Islam, as they are attracted by its social teachings and they became important personages in Islam later. These included Abdullah ibn Masud, a shepherd who had the particular talent for memorizing the new revelations and became one of the most authoritative early reciters of Quran. Khabab ibn al-Arhafat, a smith and maker of swords. The two freedmen, Suhaib ibn Sina and Amr ibn Yazin, who had been adopted as confederates from the powerful clan of Makhzum, and a group of slaves, man and woman, the most famous of whom was the Abyssinian Bilal, who was made as the first muezzin to call the faithful for prayers. The Prophet also bestowed another honor on him by appointing him as the first treasurer of the Islamic society. Montgomery Watt has done extensive research on the social and economic background of the first 40 converts. He classifies the Qurayshi clans of Muhammad's time into three major groups. All but one of the clans is the first group were the weaker clans in the city. It was from this group that most of the Muhammad's early converts came. Most of the Muhammad's most dedicated enemies came from the more powerful clans, which were categorized as the second and third groups by Watt. Thus, early Islam was a movement of young men and people who felt that they were being pushed into the marginal place. Inclusiveness and respect for the other with all their differences. Mohammed never claimed that he had founded a new world religion for the Arabs who seemed to have been left out of the divine plan. God had sent Jews and Christians a scripture. The Holy Quran calls them as Ahl al-Kitab, the people of the book, but no such special revelation to the Arabs. Muhammad was able to recognize what had gone wrong in his society. The revelation that Muhammad had started to reside under divine inspiration answered the Arabs' deeper wounds and deeper needs. However, neither Quran nor the Prophet claimed anything new about the revelation on Mount Hira. This was simply the old religion of the God, which had been revealed over and over again. The religion of Allah that Muhammad would shortly begin to preach in Mecca had begun not on Mount Hira, but on the day of the creation. The message had always been the same. So all religions were essentially one. The Quran never claimed to cancel out the previous revelations. But in principle, one cult, one tradition, one scripture was as good as another. What mattered was the quality of one's surrender to God. People had no business to desire another religion than God's. The only thing that made Muhammad's revelation different was that for the first time, God had sent a messenger to the Quraysh and a scripture in their own language. Muslim tradition believes that there was about 124,000 prophets, a symbolic number meaning infinitude. Even after the death of the Prophet, Jews and Christians were never required to convert to Islam, but were allowed to practice their religion freely in the Islamic Empire. Like later, Zoroastrians, Hindus, Buddhists, and Sikhs were also counted among the prophets of the book. It has never been a problem for Muslims to coexist with the people of other religions. The Islamic Empire was able to play host to Christians and Jews for centuries, but the West found it almost impossible to tolerate Muslims and Jews in Christian territories. The Holy Quran presents the Prophet as a very ordinary person, It introduces him as an orphan who needed shelter, erring mortal who needed guidance, and a needy human who was to be sufficed. It calls him often an Ummi Nabi, which can be interpreted as one who is fully open to the revelations. He was no savior nor messiah. He was just a nadir, that is a warner, a deliverer of God's message. But this does not mean that he is a passive receiver of and deliverer of messages. It is through him God established his will. The prophet actively intervened in history. Jesus passively received and suffered the tyranny of the regime of his day. Buddha was not able to do anything when the people of his tribe came and complained to him that the tribal kingdom is usurped by the neighboring state. But Mohammed actively intervened in the history, took the sword, fought the enemies, suffered defeats, made peace treaties, and finally secured victory. He was a shrewd politician, practiced an ethical politics, which was always inclusive, but at the same time, he never failed to assert the separate identity of the Muslims. He accepted many central faiths of Abrahamic religions, such as the belief in the last day. Above all, the Prophet had instructed the Muslims to pray facing Jerusalem, as Jews and Christians did. Muhammad's night journey to Jerusalem had shown that this ancient holy city was central to the Muslim faith too, and in adopting Jerusalem as the Qibla, it was constant reminder and demonstration of the new religion's connection with that of the older revelations. It made them to identify with the other peoples of the book. When Muslim elders like Al-Bara ibn Marar had put forward a different suggestion, Muhammad's reply was very ambiguous. However, when the difference between Jews and Muslims increased, and when the Jews began to reject Muhammad, he became very much disappointed. But there were friendly Jews with whom he had wide and deep dialogues. Through these dialogues and through the revelations during the period, he came to know more about the history of the people of the book. When he learns about Ishmael, son of Hagar and Ibrahim, it gave a new significance to the Kaaba. Till the day he was bringing the Arabs the book, now the time had come to that he would bring them distinctly an Arabic faith. In late January 624, during the month of Shaban, about 18 months after the Hijrah, Muhammad was leading a Friday prayer in the mosque. Suddenly inspired by a revelation, he made the whole congregation turn round and pray facing Mecca instead of Jerusalem. God had given the Muslims not only a new focus and a new direction, but a new identity also. The change of Qibla had been called Muhammad's most creative religious gesture. In turning towards Mecca, Muslims were tacitly declaring that they belonged to none of the established communities, but turning only towards God Himself. In prostrating in the direction of Kaaba, they were reverting to the primordial faith. Thus, the change of Qibla was the sign of a proud new Muslim identity. Much can be said about the wars led by Muhammad. He won many wars and lost a few also. But both in victory and defeat, he showed enormous restraint and high level political diplomacy. Muhammad's victory over Quraysh at the siege of Medina was a magnificent victory. The old tribal system, the ideology of Hilm, and the aggressive capitalism of Quraysh had proved ineffective before the moral and political power of Islam. Though the victory over the siege of Medina was horrible, it marked the end of beginning of the worst part of the jihad. The bloody phase of jihad was now over. Muhammad had always wanted to win the Qurayshi over to his side rather than destroy them completely. And after the siege, he began the process of reconciliation without showing any sign of weakness or indecision. The Quran teaches that war is always abominable. Muslims must never open hostilities. For the only just war is the war of self-defense. But once they have undertaken the war, Muslims must fight with absolute commitments in order to bring the fighting to an end, the hostilities, as soon as possible. If the enemy proposes a truce or shows an inclination towards peace, Muslims are commanded by the Quran to end hostilities immediately, provided that the terms of peace are not immoral and dishonorable. The purpose of all the wars fought by Mohammed was to restore peace and harmony as soon as possible. One should not forget the word Islam comes from the root which means peace and reconciliation. The marked change of the policy of jihad after the massacre in Medina siege is a proof of this. In the following year, he insisted on policies of peace and reconciliation to the extent that it led to the alienation of his closest and most loyal companions. One such example is the Hudaybiyah Treaty, which was perceived by the Prophet's closest companions, such as Umar, and as a clear letdown of Muslims by the Prophet. Ibn Shaq writes as, the apostles' companions had gone out without any doubt of occupying Mecca because of the vision which the apostle had seen, and when they saw the negotiation for peace and a withdrawal going on and what the apostle had taken on himself, they felt depressed almost to the point of death. The surah which descended at the Prophet after Hudaybiyah, giving a clear chit to his decision, was announced by Muhammad as, which is clearer to me than anything under the sun. It revealed the full significance of Hudaybiyah and is a necessary complement and qualification of the theology of the just war. When the critics of Islam accused Islam and its prophet being inherently aggressive, they should take into account Muhammad's theology of peace as revealed in and after Hudaybiyah. Of course, there is a difference between the pacifist images of Jesus and that of Muhammad. Yes, there is a difference. The difference lies in that Muhammad was trying to implement his teaching in more practical terms that was immediately related to particular political or social situation. In fact, we know very little about the day-to-day political practices and attitudes of Jesus. One should not forget this difference when she criticized the hudud punishment practiced in Islamic states. Muhammad lived in a tribal society. He was not only a preacher like other messiahs, but was also a practitioner. As a skillful Arab politician, Muhammad knew how to use the rules of the tribal system to the advantages of the newly created Ummah. We have now long overgrown to tribal or communal ethic and regard it cruel and arbitrary, but it had been the only way to secure a modicum of peace and order in more primitive societies. We find it abominable that a sacred book and a holy prophet recommend that a thief should have his hand chopped off, and the followers of the faith must retaliate exactly eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But we must remember that neither Jesus nor Buddha were the heads of a state, but Muhammad became a head of a state after Hudaybiyah. He had to concern and he had the responsibility of maintaining the public order in a tribal society. Muhammad conceived Ummah as a sort of a super tribe and had to continue the old methods of keeping order. There was no police force in Medina or in Arabia from time immemorial. The next of the kin had always been responsible for punishing the offenders and creating deterrent that would, as far as possible, inhibit violence. Though Quran recalls the rules of God had sent down the Hebrew prophets in the Torah, which sanctions revenge, it goes one step further when it says, and therein we prescribed for them a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, an ear for ear, a tooth for the tooth, and for wounds retaliation. but whosoever forgoes it as a free will offering, that shall be for him an expiation. Though Mohammed had not professed to love the enemies, he urged Muslims to forgive one another and forego retaliation. Muhammad's ideal of forgiveness, however limited, a form was an innovation in Arabian tribal society and a moral advance on the old system. It is often said Christianity is a religion of love and Buddhism a religion of compassion and ethics, but Islam is a religion of social justice. Quranic definition of the religious spirit is more practicable than other religions. In the Ummah, society is to be organized on egalitarian principles. The same duties were required for everybody, and there was to be no elites or hierarchy of priests and monks. Alms giving would seek to close the gulf between the rich and the poor, and to free the slave was a virtuous deed. True piety is this: so believe in God and the last day, the angels, the book, the prophets, to give off our substances, however cherished, to kinsmen and orphans, to needy, the traveler, to the beggars, and to ransom the slave, to perform the prayer, to pray the zakat. After the final victory over Mecca, like a most sensible politician and a compassionate leader, Muhammad proclaimed an amnesty for past offenses. Only 10 people were blacklisted. These were not the ones who led resistance against him, but those he would not forgive were the propagandists who had mocked and made fun of him and God's revelations. Whoever who came for amnesty was forgiven. Those who decided to accept Islam were warmly welcomed and affectionately greeted by Muhammad. The conquest of Mecca had been the final victory. The word Fath means opening, and it opened a new door to Islam. By conquering Mecca, Muhammad had vindicated his prophetic claim. But this conquest had been achieved without bloodshed, and Muhammad's peaceful policy paid off. Islam is said to be most misunderstood religion. For the West and other critics of Islam, Muhammad is the most misunderstood prophet. He began his life as a very ordinary and humble person, but soon intervened in the contemporary history and changed the course of the world history. In today's world of turmoil, we have many things to learn from the life and deeds of Prophet. This is a time for reconciliation between different communities. Politics is nothing but the art of living with the other. Professor, post-September 11 world witnesses increased intolerances. This is a period for reconciliation between communities. We require reconciliation, forgiveness, and peace initiatives immediately. I hope this symposium will pave a way for such things, as we can learn much about the art of reconciliation from the life of the Prophet. I once again thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity to be with you and share my views on the Holy Prophet. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to thank Professor A. Marx for that very beautiful presentation on the life sketch of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his traditions and teachings, and the socio-political aspects of his message. Thank you very much, Professor A. Marx. Towards the end of his speech, he mentioned that Prophet Muhammad was one of the most misunderstood personalities. He also mentioned that today we are living at a time when we need more of reconciliation between communities. I think this exactly is the reason why the organizers have arranged this symposium on Prophet Muhammad, Mercy to Humanity. So I hope this symposium will provide us with the answers that we need. Let me welcome Dr. M.A.M. Shukri, the director of Jamia Nazimia, who arrived later on, and he is also going to present us with a good speech on Prophet Muhammad and its present day and how it could be suitable for our present, its relevance to humanity in present context. We will also welcome Sheikh Mufti Rizvi, the president of the Al Saran Muslim Theologian Society, who is also going to preside over the open discussion that will be held towards the end of this symposium. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the tea break, and we invite you all to please step outside, and the tea has been arranged for you, and we'll be returning here at about 11 o'clock. Thank you very much. Delivered by Professor Daya Edrisinghe, a senior professor of philosophy at the University of Kelaniya.